After my husband cheated, his mistress's husband came to me with an offer I couldn't refuse. I have a net worth of $400 million, Daniel Thornton said, his voice as cold as the ice melting in my untouched drink. Just say the word, and we'll be at the city clerk's office tomorrow morning. I didn't need time to think. My husband had already signed away our marriage without my knowledge, stolen everything I'd sacrificed for him, and handed it to the woman sitting 30 feet away, laughing at something he'd just whispered. It took me exactly 3 seconds to agree, but what started as a contract for revenge became something far more complicated and far more dangerous than either of us anticipated. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment I realized the man I'd loved for 10 years had already erased me from his life. I chose the table myself, tucked behind a thicket of potted ferns in the corner of the Garden Terrace Cafe in Soho. The spot offered perfect visibility of the entire patio while rendering me practically invisible. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent the last decade making myself visible, valuable, indispensable to my husband's dreams. Now I was hiding, watching those dreams play out with someone else in the starring role I'd vacated without even knowing it. My Arnold Palmer had gone warm an hour ago, the lemonade and iced tea separating into distinct watery layers that I hadn't bothered to stir. The Tuesday afternoon sun filtered through the canvas awning above, casting everything in that particular golden light that made New York feel almost gentle, almost forgiving. It wasn't. 30 feet away, at table 6 by the koi pond, Tyler Morrison, my husband of 10 years, was laughing. The sound carried across the patio with that easy confidence I'd fallen in love with when we were both 22 and stupid with ambition. His hand, still wearing the platinum wedding band I'd picked out at that little jeweler's in Brooklyn, was draped casually over the back of another woman's chair. Not just any woman. Victoria Blackwell, Tory to anyone in the New York logistics and finance world who mattered, sat across from him in a crimson silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I knew who she was. Everyone in our industry knew Tori. She was the wife of Daniel Thornton, chairman of Thornton Maritime Group, one of the largest shipping conglomerates on the East Coast. She had her own reputation, sharp, sophisticated, ruthless in negotiations, and apparently sleeping with my husband. Tyler leaned forward, said something that made her throw her head back with laughter. Her hand came up to touch his cheek, a gesture so intimate, so practiced, that my chest constricted painfully. That was the touch of someone who'd done it many times before. This wasn't a new affair. This was established, comfortable, real. My phone buzzed, a text from my paralegal at Morrison Development. Mrs. Morrison, the county clerk's office called again about those documents Tyler filed last week. Do you want me to handle it? My fingers hovered over the screen. Last week. Tyler had told me he was filing the bankruptcy protection papers, that we needed to restructure the company to save it from the lawsuit that was threatening to destroy everything we'd built. Everything I'd built, if I was being honest. I was the one who'd left my position as senior audit manager at Deloitte 5 years ago. I was the one who'd liquidated my 401k, $180,000 of careful savings accumulated over a decade of 70-hour work weeks and sacrificed weekends. I was the one who'd given up my corner office with the view of Bryant Park to manage Tyler's books from our cramped apartment in Queens, working 18-hour days to make his construction company viable. And what had Tyler contributed? Charm, vision, big dreams that sounded beautiful at 3 in the morning when we were tangled in sheets, planning our future. But dreams don't pay invoices. Dreams don't pass audits. I did. I watched as Tyler's hand moved from the back of Tori's chair to her shoulder, his thumb tracing small circles on her bare skin. The same movement he used to do with me, back when he still touched me like I mattered. When was the last time we'd had dinner that wasn't interrupted by his phone? When was the last time he'd looked at me the way he was looking at her right now, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered? 3 months? 6? I couldn't remember. The realization hit harder than it should have. My CPA training kicked in, that analytical part of my brain that had helped me survive in the male-dominated world of Big Four accounting. Emotions were messy, unreliable data points. Facts were clean. Facts could be audited. Fact, my husband was having an affair. Fact, he'd asked me to sign post-nuptial papers a month ago, claiming it was to protect our assets from the lawsuit. Fact, he'd promised to reverse those papers as soon as the crisis passed. Fact, the crisis had never existed. I'd been too trusting, too focused on the spreadsheets to see the real numbers being run on me. My phone buzzed again. This time, an email notification from my bank. Our joint savings account, the one we'd agreed to keep untouched except for emergencies, showed a withdrawal of $47,000 3 days ago. The notation, Land Purchase Deposit, Morrison/Blackwell Development LLC. Morrison/Blackwell, not Morrison Development. A new entity. A partnership. My hands started shaking. I set the phone down carefully on the wrought iron table, focusing on keeping my breathing steady. A panic attack wouldn't help. Crying wouldn't help. I'd learned that lesson the hard way during my first year at Deloitte, when a senior partner had reduced me to tears during an audit review. You don't show weakness in business. You document, analyze, and respond strategically. I opened my phone's camera and zoomed in. Tyler was showing Tori something on his phone now. From the way her eyes lit up, the way she clapped her hands together with delight, I could guess what it was. Property listings, floor plans, their future, built on the ashes of mine. I took 3 photos, clear, well-lit, admissible as evidence if it came to that. It would come to that. Every instinct screamed at me to stand up, walk over to that table, and throw the warm Arnold Palmer in Tyler's face. To demand answers. To make a scene that would embarrass him the way his betrayal was currently shredding whatever was left of my dignity. But Rebecca Hayes didn't make scenes. Rebecca Hayes, I still thought of myself by my maiden name sometimes, in the quiet moments when I wasn't being Mrs. Morrison, had graduated summa cum laude from Baruch College, had passed the CPA exam on her first attempt with scores in the 95th percentile, had been recruited by 3 of the Big 4 firms before accepting Deloitte's offer. Rebecca Hayes knew better than to confront without preparation. I pulled out my leather portfolio, the one Tyler had given me for our 5th anniversary, back when he still remembered anniversaries, and began taking notes, timestamps, physical descriptions of their interaction, the name of the cafe, potential witnesses. Documentation first, emotion later. My mind drifted back to a month ago. Tyler had come home late on a Thursday, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. He'd sat across from me at our small kitchen table and taken both my hands in his. "Becca, baby, we're in trouble." The words had sent ice through my veins. We'd been in trouble before. Cash flow crunches, delayed payments from clients, the normal growing pains of a small construction company. But something about his tone that night had been different. "The Riverside project," he'd continued. "The client is suing us for breach of contract. Their lawyers are saying we used substandard materials. It's bullshit, but the legal fees alone could bankrupt us. And if they win," he'd let the sentence hang there, heavy with implication. "How bad?" I'd asked, already mentally calculating our liquid assets, possible lines of credit, worst-case scenarios. "Bad enough that they could go after everything. The company, our savings, the apartment, everything we've built together. We'll fight it," I'd said immediately. "I'll review the contracts, find the loopholes. We'll hire the best." "There's another option." Tyler had pulled out a folder then, official-looking documents with the seal of our attorney's office. "Post-nuptial agreement. We transfer all marital assets into separate individual ownership. If the company goes under, they can only come after my half. Your savings, your retirement accounts, they'll be protected." It had made sense. Cold, calculated sense. Exactly the kind of strategic move I would have recommended if I'd been consulting for a client. "But the house," I'd protested weakly. "We'd just bought a modest 2-bedroom in Forest Hills. It wasn't much, but it was ours. That's in both our names. We'll refinance it under my name only, just temporarily. As soon as this lawsuit resolves, we'll reverse everything. I promise, Becca, this is just to protect you, to protect us." I'd believed him. God, I'd actually believed him. I'd signed the papers right there at the kitchen table, Tyler's hand warm on my shoulder as I wrote my name on line after line. His kiss on my forehead had felt like a blessing, a promise of protection. It had been a con. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and inescapable. Every reassurance, every "I love you," every promise of just temporarily, all of it had been theater, a performance designed to get me to willingly surrender everything I'd worked for. And I'd applauded. Across the patio, Tyler was standing now, pulling out Tori's chair in a gesture of old-fashioned chivalry he'd stopped performing for me years ago. They walked toward the exit, his hand on the small of her back, her head tilted toward him in rapt attention. Neither of them looked my direction. I was invisible to them, already erased. "Have you seen enough?" The voice came from directly above me, deep and gravelly, with an edge that suggested whoever it belonged to wasn't used to being kept waiting. I looked up. The man standing beside my table was tall, easily 6'2", with the kind of presence that made the bustling cafe seem suddenly smaller. He wore a charcoal suit that had clearly been custom-tailored, the fabric draping perfectly across broad shoulders. His face was all sharp angles, strong jaw, high cheekbones, deep-set eyes that were currently fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. I recognized him immediately. Daniel Thornton, chairman of Thornton Maritime Group. I'd seen his photo in the Wall Street Journal just last month, accompanying an article about his company's expansion into Asian markets. And more importantly, Tori Blackwell's husband. Ex-husband? The tabloids had been speculating about their divorce for the last 6 months, but nothing had been confirmed. "Mr. Thornton," I said, proud that my voice came out steady. Professional, as if strange billionaires interrupted my surveillance operations every day. He pulled out the chair across from me without waiting for an invitation, his movements controlled and deliberate. Everything about him radiated authority, the kind that came from years of boardroom negotiations and commanding thousands of employees. "Mrs. Morrison," he replied, placing a thick manila folder on the table between us. The sound of it hitting the wrought iron was final, like a judge's gavel. I stared at the folder, then back at him. "How did you know I'd be here?" "I've been having your husband followed for 3 weeks. He said it matter-of-factly, as if hiring private investigators was as routine as ordering coffee. "Which means I've also been having my wife followed. Ex-wife as of 2 months ago, though the asset division is still being litigated. Ex-wife. So it was official. When I saw Morrison reserved this table," he continued, "I made an educated guess that you'd figured it out. The wronged spouse always wants to see it with their own eyes. Confirmation makes the betrayal real." His words struck too close to home. I lifted my chin. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're Rebecca Hayes Morrison, senior audit manager at Deloitte until 5 years ago when you left to help your husband start Morrison Development. I know you liquidated your 401k and cashed out every stock option to fund his startup. I know you passed on a promotion to partner track to do his bookkeeping." He leaned forward slightly. "And I know your husband is spending my money." That got my attention. "What?" He tapped the folder. "Page 5. Have a look." My hands trembled as I opened it. The first few pages were surveillance photos. Tyler and Tori at various restaurants, entering a hotel on the Upper East Side, walking through what looked like a construction site. Each photo was time-stamped and dated, a forensic record of betrayal. Page 5 was different. It was a notarized copy of a court document. Final judgment of dissolution of marriage. My name, Rebecca Hayes Morrison, on one line. Tyler Morrison on another. The date made my stomach drop. 3 weeks ago. The crimson seal of the New York County Supreme Court seemed to mock me from the page. "How?" My voice cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again. "How is this possible? He said he hadn't filed anything yet. He said we were waiting until after the lawsuit." "He filed the day you signed the post-nuptial agreement." Daniel's voice was brutally matter-of-fact, delivering truth like a scalpel cutting away diseased tissue. "And because you signed documents waiving all claims to marital assets, ostensibly to protect them from creditors, you are now, from a legal standpoint, entitled to exactly nothing." The folder slipped from my fingers. Pages scattered across the table. Photos of my husband's betrayal mixing with legal documents that proved I'd been played for a fool. The house you're living in, Daniel continued, his tone almost clinical, is solely in his name. The car you drive, his name. The joint savings account you've been contributing to for 10 years? He drained it last week. Every penny is legally his property. You helped him build a company worth approximately $3 million, and your share of it is zero. I couldn't breathe. The cafe spun around me, the cheerful chatter of other patrons, the splash of the koi pond, the golden afternoon light, all of it suddenly felt obscene. How dare the world continue being beautiful when mine was collapsing? "Why are you telling me this?" I managed to ask. "Because my ex-wife is funneling money from my company to support your ex-husband's new business ventures, and I need someone I can trust to stop it." I forced myself to look at him properly, to see past the shock and focus on what he was actually saying. Daniel Thornton didn't look like a man who'd just lost his wife to my husband. He looked like a CEO presenting a quarterly report, calculated, strategic, emotionless. Maybe that should have scared me. Instead, I found it oddly comforting. Emotion had made me blind. Logic might be my way out. "Your wife, ex-wife, is embezzling from Thornton Maritime?" I asked, latching onto the concrete facts like a lifeline. "Approximately $20 million over the past 18 months, funneled through various shell companies and fraudulent vendor contracts. I've suspected it for a while, but I couldn't prove it without tipping her off." He pulled another document from inside his jacket. "Then I hired a forensic accounting firm to do a preliminary audit. The patterns match your husband's construction company perfectly." He slid the document toward me. It was a financial analysis, professional and thorough, highlighting suspicious transactions between Thornton Maritime and Morrison Development, inflated invoices for materials, advance payments for projects that showed zero progress, consulting fees for services that were never rendered. My professional training took over, analyzing the numbers with the detachment I'd learned in my first year of audit work. "This is sophisticated money laundering, multi-layered, using legitimate business transactions as cover. Someone with access to your internal systems set this up. Patricia Reynolds, my head of accounting. She's been with the company for 15 years. I trusted her." His jaw tightened, the first real emotion I'd seen from him. "She's been Tori's inside connection, approving these transactions without board oversight." "Can't you just fire her?" "Not without cause that satisfies the board, and Tori has allies there. Old money connections, people who've known her family for generations. If I move against Patricia without ironclad evidence, they'll claim I'm retaliating against my ex-wife and stage a coup." He leaned back in his chair. "I need someone who can conduct an internal audit, document every fraudulent transaction, and build a case strong enough to override shareholder politics." "You need someone who wants revenge as badly as you do," I said quietly. "I need someone whose professional competence I don't have to question. Your resume is impeccable, Mrs. Morrison. Or would you prefer Ms. Hayes now?" The question hit harder than it should have. I'd been Mrs. Morrison for so long I'd forgotten who Rebecca Hayes was, that ambitious 22-year-old who'd believed she could audit the world into fairness and order. "I don't understand what you want from me," I said, even though I was beginning to. "I want you to marry me." The words hung in the air between us, absurd and impossible. "Excuse me?" "A contract marriage," he clarified. "Legally binding but strictly professional. As my wife, you'll have the authority to access everything in the company. You can replace Patricia, audit the entire system, and cut off Tori's access to my corporate funds. In exchange, I'll provide you with legal representation, financial security, and the position of CFO at Thornton Maritime Group." I should have said no immediately, should have stood up, walked away from this stranger and his insane proposition, and handled my divorce like a normal person. Hired a lawyer, fought for my share, moved on with my life. But I wasn't going to get a share. Daniel had made that crystal clear. Tyler had outmaneuvered me perfectly, using my trust and my own professional expertise against me. I'd helped him structure the perfect theft, gift-wrapped my life's work, and handed it over with a smile. And I had nothing. No house, no savings, no marriage. Just a successful career I'd walked away from, and a reputation in the industry that would be tarnished the moment word got out that I'd been stupid enough to sign away everything to a cheating husband. Rebecca Hayes, the forensic accounting specialist who'd caught million-dollar frauds at Fortune 500 companies, had missed the con happening in her own kitchen. Why me? I asked. You could hire any forensic accountant in New York. Someone without all this. I gestured vaguely at the scattered papers, the evidence of my personal disaster. Because you have motivation, Daniel said simply. Every other accountant I hire would be doing it for money, prestige, or career advancement. You'd be doing it because Tyler Morrison and Tory Blackwell destroyed your life. That kind of motivation can't be bought. You're saying you want me angry. I'm saying anger makes people focused, thorough, relentless. He tilted his head slightly. Tell me I'm wrong. He wasn't wrong. Sitting there in that cafe, watching the spot where my husband had just been canoodling with another man's wife, I felt a fury building inside me that was almost frightening in its intensity. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger I'd felt when I first saw them together. It was cold, calculating, surgical. I wanted to take apart their schemes the way I'd once taken apart balance sheets at Deloitte. I wanted to find every lie, expose every fraud, and make them pay for underestimating me. 3 conditions, I heard myself say. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. First, I want a written employment contract before any marriage license. CFO position, salary commensurate with the role, and complete autonomy over the audit. You don't interfere with my methods or timeline. Agreed. $350,000 annually plus performance bonuses. I assume that's acceptable? It was more than I'd made at Deloitte, and substantially more than Tyler's company had ever paid me. Second condition, I want access to independent legal counsel. Someone not on your payroll, someone who can review this entire arrangement and make sure I'm not walking into another con. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Fair. I'll provide a list of firms with no connection to Thornton Maritime. You can choose whoever you trust. And third, I took a deep breath. If at any point I decide this arrangement isn't working, I can walk away. No penalties, no consequences, clean break. Daniel was quiet for a moment, studying me with those intense, dark eyes. You want an exit clause. I've just learned what happens when you commit to something without protecting yourself. I won't make that mistake twice. All right, he said finally. Exit clause included. You can terminate the arrangement with 30 days' notice, keep your salary through the notice period, and receive 6 months severance. In exchange, you'll sign an NDA about anything you learn during the audit that isn't directly related to the fraud. It was more generous than I'd expected, almost too generous. Why are you being so accommodating? I asked suspiciously. Because I've read your work, Ms. Hayes. Your audit reports from Deloitte are legendary, thorough, airtight, and absolutely brutal to whoever was on the receiving end. If I'm going to bring down Tori and dismantle her network, I need someone who won't flinch when things get ugly. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Meet me at the city clerk's office tomorrow morning at 9. Bring your lawyer if you've chosen one by then. We'll sign the employment contract first, then handle the marriage license. He turned to leave, then paused. And Ms. Hayes? I know this seems insane, but sometimes the only way to fight an irrational betrayal is with an equally irrational countermove. Tyler and Tori won't see this coming. That element of surprise is worth everything. He walked away, leaving me alone with the scattered papers and the cold remains of my Arnold Palmer. I looked down at the divorce decree again. Final judgment of dissolution of marriage. 3 weeks ago. While I'd been working 18-hour days to keep his company afloat, to save the business we'd supposedly built together, Tyler had been at the courthouse ending our marriage. I thought about the I love yous he'd said in that time, the kisses goodbye in the morning, the way he'd held me 2 nights ago when I'd been too exhausted to undress myself, just helped me into bed and stroked my hair until I fell asleep. All of it had been a lie. I'd already been his ex-wife, and he'd let me keep playing the role. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. Working late tonight, don't wait up. Love you. I stared at those 2 words. Love you. Such a small phrase to contain such monumental dishonesty. I typed back, Okay. Love you too. Then I picked up Daniel Thornton's business card from where he'd left it beside the scattered papers and took a photo of the divorce decree. Evidence. Documentation. The beginning of my countermove. I didn't go home. Home wasn't really home anymore, was it? It was Tyler's house, bought with Tyler's money, decorated to Tyler's taste. I'd been living there as a guest without realizing it, a temporary occupant who could be evicted at any moment. Instead, I checked into a Hampton Inn near LaGuardia and spread the contents of Daniel's folder across the queen-sized bed. Photos of Tyler and Tori, financial statements from Morrison Development, the divorce decree that proved I'd been married to a ghost for 3 weeks, and documents. So many documents. I started with the post-nuptial agreement I'd signed a month ago, reading it with fresh eyes. Not as a trusting wife trying to help her husband, but as a forensic auditor looking for fraud. It was all there. Hidden in the legal language, buried beneath clauses about mutual asset protection and temporary financial restructuring, were provisions that stripped me of everything. The house wasn't being temporarily transferred to Tyler's name. It was a permanent conveyance. The joint accounts weren't being protected, they were being dissolved, with all funds allocated to him as business capital. I'd signed away 10 years of my life in 15 minutes at our kitchen table. My hands shook as I pulled out my laptop and logged into my personal document scanner app. Every piece of paper Tyler had ever given me to sign was stored there. I'd been religious about keeping digital copies, a habit from my Deloitte days. It took me 2 hours to find what I was looking for, the original divorce petition. My signature looked wrong. I zoomed in, comparing it to other signatures on other documents. The curve of the R in Rebecca was too sharp. The loop on the H in Hayes was too small. The overall slant was off by several degrees. My heart pounded as I saved the image and attached it to an email to a document examiner I'd worked with on a fraud case 3 years ago. Subject line, urgent, potential forgery, need analysis ASAP. I hit send at 2:47 a.m. and waited. The response came at 7:15 a.m. Rebecca, ran the preliminary comparison. That's not your signature. 95% confidence of forgery. Can provide detailed analysis and court testimony if needed. Call me. There it was. Proof that Tyler hadn't just betrayed me. He'd committed fraud. He'd forged my signature on legal documents, lied to a judge about my consent, and obtained a divorce decree under false pretenses. I could fight this. I could hire a lawyer, file a motion to vacate the judgment, drag Tyler through the courts and make him pay for what he'd done. But that would take months, years maybe. And during that time, I'd be tied to him, fighting over scraps while he and Tori built their new life with my money. Daniel Thornton was offering me something different. Not vindication through the legal system, but power. Immediate, direct, undeniable power. As his wife and CFO, I wouldn't be begging judges for fairness. I'd be in control. I'd have access to the systems Tyler was using to launder money. I'd have the authority to freeze accounts, demand audits, and expose every lie. And Tyler would never see it coming. I looked at my reflection in the hotel mirror. Dark circles under my eyes from no sleep, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, my Deloitte t-shirt from a charity 5K I'd run 5 years ago, back when I still had time for things like exercise and fun. Who was I now? Not Mrs. Tyler Morrison anymore? That woman had been a fiction, but not quite Rebecca Hayes either. That ambitious girl had died slowly over the past 5 years, sacrificed bit by bit to build someone else's dream. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe the only way to fight an irrational betrayal was with an equally irrational countermove. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on his business card. He answered on the second ring. Ms. Hayes. I need you to add something to the employment contract, I said without preamble. I'm listening. If Tyler contests the marriage or tries to claim I was coerced, I want legal protection. Full defense paid by Thornton Maritime, and an affidavit from you stating this was a mutual business arrangement. Consider it done. Does this mean you're accepting my offer? I looked at the divorce decree one more time, at Tyler's signature, bold and confident, at my forged signature beside it, a ghost of who I used to be. I'll see you at 9, I said, and hung up. The Manhattan Municipal Building was exactly as unromantic as you'd expect for a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Harsh fluorescent lighting, scuffed linoleum floors, and a waiting area filled with couples in various states of excitement or resigned determination. Daniel was already there when I arrived, leaning against a marble pillar in another impeccable suit, navy this time, with a subtle pinstripe. He looked like he could have been waiting for a business meeting rather than a marriage license. "You came," he said, and I couldn't tell if he was surprised or pleased. I almost didn't. I held up the briefcase I'd borrowed from the hotel's business center. But then I remembered that Tyler thinks I'm too weak to fight back. I'd like to prove him wrong. "You brought a lawyer." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Sarah Chin from Liu and Associates. She spent 3 hours last night reviewing your contract and asking very pointed questions about my mental state." I smiled tightly. Apparently, agreeing to marry a stranger for revenge raises some red flags in the legal community. "And what did Ms. Chin conclude?" "That you're either setting me up for a spectacular con, or this is the most aggressively pragmatic business arrangement she's ever seen." I handed him a folder. "She had some revisions to the employment contract, non-negotiables, I'm afraid." Daniel took the folder and skimmed through it, his expression unreadable. After a long moment, he pulled out a pen and signed each revision without comment. "You're not even going to argue?" I asked, surprised. "Your lawyer is protecting your interests. That's her job." He handed the folder back. "Besides, these revisions are reasonable. I'd have done the same in your position." We handled the paperwork efficiently, like two lawyers closing a merger. Employment contract signed first, witnessed and notarized. Then the marriage license application, surprisingly simple for something that would legally bind us together. "Previous marriages?" the clerk asked, looking at me over her reading glasses. "Divorced," I said. The word felt strange in my mouth. 3 weeks divorced, and I was about to remarry. "Decree finalized 3 weeks ago." If the clerk thought that was unusually fast, she didn't comment. She'd probably seen stranger in this office. "And you, Mr. Thornton?" "Divorced, 2 months finalized." "Rings?" Daniel produced 2 simple platinum bands from his jacket pocket. They weren't ornate or expensive looking, just plain, unadorned metal. Practical. "I took a guess on your size," he said quietly, handing me the smaller one. "If it doesn't fit, we can get it resized." It slid onto my finger perfectly. I tried not to think about how I'd picked out Tyler's ring with such care, agonizing over the width and finish, wanting it to be perfect. These rings were tools, not symbols. That made them easier to accept. The ceremony itself took less than 5 minutes. "Repeat after me. Sign here. Congratulations." The clerk handed us our marriage certificate with all the enthusiasm of someone processing a parking ticket. "Welcome to married life," she said dryly. "Next." We stepped out into the hallway, legally married, complete strangers. "Well, Mrs. Thornton," Daniel said, "shall we go inform your ex-husband of his changed circumstances?" Daniel's car was waiting outside, a black Mercedes-Benz S-Class that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire career. The driver opened the door without comment, clearly accustomed to his employer's unusual requests. "Where to?" Daniel asked as we settled into the leather seats. "Your office. I need to start the audit immediately." I pulled out my phone, staring at the photo of our marriage certificate I'd just taken against the hood of his car. The official seal was clearly visible, along with both our names, Rebecca Hayes and Daniel Thornton. My finger hovered over Tyler's contact, still saved as "my husband" in my phone. I hadn't had the heart to change it yet. Well, he wasn't my husband anymore. He hadn't been for 3 weeks, but I was someone's wife now, and Tyler had no idea. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Daniel asked quietly. "Once you send that message, there's no taking it back. He'll know we're connected. He'll warn Tori." "Good," I said. "I want them scared. Scared people make mistakes." I typed out the message, keeping it brief and professional. "Thanks for quietly finalizing our divorce. It allowed me to get the paperwork done just in time to become the legal wife of the chairman of Thornton Maritime Group this morning. Good luck to you and your mistress." I attached the photo and hit send before I could second-guess myself. "Delivered" appeared almost immediately. Then, "Read." I watched those 3 dots appear, indicating Tyler was typing. They disappeared, appeared again, disappeared. My phone started ringing. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call and blocked his number. That felt good, I admitted. Daniel's mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile. You're more ruthless than I expected. I appreciate that in a CFO. I'm not your CFO yet. I haven't even seen the office. Then let's fix that. He leaned forward and said something to the driver I couldn't hear. My phone buzzed again, a different number. Tyler must have borrowed someone else's phone. The voicemail notification appeared seconds later. Against my better judgment, I played it on speaker. Tyler's voice was frantic, stripped of its usual smooth charm. Becca, what the hell is that photo? Is this some kind of joke? Call me back. We need to talk about this. That's not real, right? You didn't actually... Jesus, Becca, call me back. In the background, I could hear a woman's voice. Tori, demanding to see the photo. Then more clearly, Tori's voice as she grabbed the phone. You little bitch! You think you can just waltz into Thornton Maritime? As long as I have shares in that company, you won't last a month. I'll make sure of it. The voicemail cut off. Daniel had been right. They were scared. And scared meant dangerous. She still has shares in your company? I asked. 18%. The divorce settlement gave her that as part of the asset division. I've been trying to buy her out, but she's refusing to sell. Says she wants to maintain her connection to the company her family helped build. His jaw tightened. What she really wants is access to our systems and the ability to block any moves I make against her. Then she'll be at the office when we announce our marriage. Almost certainly. She still has board privileges until the annual meeting in 3 months. We can't remove her without a shareholder vote. I thought about this, turning the problem over in my mind the way I used to analyze complex audit findings. So, she'll see me coming. She'll have time to cover her tracks, move money, destroy evidence. Which is why we need you to move faster, Daniel said. Pat Reynolds doesn't know you're coming yet. Neither do Tori's other allies in the company. You'll have a brief window, maybe 24 hours, where they're still underestimating you. Then we need to hit hard in those first 24 hours. Freeze the accounts I can freeze, lock down the systems, force them to play defense instead of offense. I pulled out my laptop. I'll need complete access to your financial systems, all of them, and I'll need IT to grant me administrative privileges before we make any public announcement. Done. I'll call ahead. As he made the call, I looked out the window at Manhattan flowing past. Somewhere in this city, Tyler was probably having a meltdown. Tori was probably plotting her countermove. They thought they'd won, thought they'd divided the spoils and could move on to their new life. They had no idea the audit was just beginning. And I was very, very good at finding things people didn't want found. The Thornton Maritime headquarters was a gleaming 30-story tower of glass and steel in the financial district, the kind of building that screamed old money and established power. The lobby alone was more impressive than Tyler's entire company. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, a massive abstract sculpture that probably cost more than my education. People stared as Daniel and I crossed to the private elevator bank. Word must have already spread. In a company this size, gossip traveled faster than emails. The elevator was empty except for us, giving me a moment to collect myself. My reflection in the polished brass doors showed a woman who looked far more confident than she felt. I'd changed at the hotel into my best interview suit, charcoal gray, tailored, professional. Armor for corporate warfare. Nervous? Daniel asked. Terrified, I admitted. But I've built a career on not showing it. The elevator doors opened on the 30th floor, executive territory. The reception area was all understated luxury. Tasteful artwork, comfortable seating, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. A woman in her 50s sat at the reception desk, her expression carefully neutral. Good morning, Mr. Thornton. Margaret, this is Rebecca Thornton, my wife. Please add her to the executive access list immediately. Margaret's eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of her surprise. Of course, sir. Congratulations to you both. Rebecca will also be joining us as Chief Financial Officer. Please schedule an all-hands meeting for this afternoon at 2. I want everyone in attendance. All departments, sir? Everyone. We continued down the hallway, past offices where people were trying very hard not to stare through their glass walls. Daniel stopped at a corner office with a spectacular view of the harbor. "This will be yours," he said, opening the door. The office was easily 3 times the size of my old workspace at Deloitte. It had a full sitting area, a conference table, built-in bookshelves, and that view, you could see all the way to the Statue of Liberty. "This is Pat Reynolds' office," I said, recognizing the nameplate that was hastily being removed by a facilities worker. "Was Pat's office. As of this morning, she's been reassigned to a different role pending review." Daniel walked to the desk and picked up a sealed envelope. "Her access cards and passwords. IT changed everything an hour ago, per my instructions. Won't that tip her off that something's wrong?" "It will, which is why you need to work fast." He handed me the envelope. "The board meeting is at 10 tomorrow morning. By then, I need you to have enough preliminary findings to justify Pat's termination and support my motion to freeze all vendor contracts pending audit review." 24 hours. To familiarize myself with an entire company's financial systems, identify the key fraud indicators, and build a defensible case. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of challenge I'd thrived on at Deloitte. "I'll need a team," I said, already mentally cataloging what I'd need. "Someone from IT, someone who knows the vendor management systems, and at least 2 junior analysts I can trust." "I'll have Margaret coordinate it. Anyone you want, you get. And I'll need you to stay out of my way." That made him pause. "Excuse me?" "You hired me for my expertise. Let me use it. I can't do my job if you're looking over my shoulder, questioning my methods, or trying to speed up my timeline. This audit will take as long as it takes. If that's a problem, it's not." Daniel cut me off. His expression was unreadable. "You're right. I hired you because you're the best. I'll stay out of your way." He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Rebecca, thank you for taking this risk, for trusting me when you have every reason not to trust anyone." "I don't trust you," I said honestly, "but I trust your desire for revenge. That's motivation I understand." After he left, I sat in Pat Reynolds' chair, my chair now, and looked out at the harbor. Somewhere in this building, Pat was probably panicking. Tori was probably making phone calls, rallying her allies. And Tyler was learning what it felt like to be erased. I opened my laptop and plugged in the access codes. Time to start digging. Within minutes, I found the first anomaly: a $5 million advance payment to Morrison Development for a warehouse renovation project. According to the internal project tracking system, work completion was listed at 0%. Tyler had taken Thornton Maritime's money and hadn't done a single day of work. I smiled and started documenting everything. The audit had begun. The all-hands meeting at 2 o'clock felt like walking into an ambush. Every seat in the main conference room was filled, with at least 50 people standing along the walls. The air crackled with tension and barely suppressed curiosity. I could see phones held at careful angles, recording, photographing, probably live texting to colleagues who couldn't get in. I stood beside Daniel at the front of the room, acutely aware that I was being evaluated by 200 pairs of eyes. Not as a professional, as the woman who'd married the boss and immediately landed the CFO job. "Thank you all for coming," Daniel began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "I know this is unusual. I'll keep it brief. This is Rebecca Thornton, my wife, and your new chief financial officer." The murmurs became outright whispers. I kept my face neutral, professional. I'd faced hostile rooms before at Deloitte. Partners who didn't think a 25-year-old woman belonged in senior audit meetings. Clients who tried to intimidate me into softening findings. This was just another performance. "Rebecca comes to us from Deloitte, where she specialized in forensic accounting and corporate fraud investigations." Daniel continued. "She has full authority to audit any department, review any transaction, and make personnel changes as necessary." A hand shot up near the back. "Sir, what about Pat Reynolds? She's been our head of accounting for 15 years. Ms. Reynolds has been reassigned to a strategic advisory role pending a comprehensive financial systems review. Corporate speak for Pat's being investigated." This review isn't about individuals, it's about ensuring our controls meet industry best practices. Lies wrapped in truth. I'd learned that language at Deloitte. In the corner of my eye, I spotted her, Patricia Reynolds, arms crossed, face carefully blank. But her knuckles were white where they gripped her elbows. She knew exactly what this meant. Rebecca? Daniel turned to me. Anything you'd like to add? I stepped forward. I understand change is uncomfortable. What I can promise is fairness and transparency. If you've seen irregularities in our financial processes and want to report them, my door is open. If you've participated in irregularities and want to come forward voluntarily, there will be protections available. I paused. But if you've actively engaged in fraud and try to cover it up, I will find you, and I will document everything. The room went very quiet. That's all, Daniel said. Back to work. As people filed out, I watched Pat Reynolds carefully. 8 employees clustered around her immediately. Solidarity or conspiracy, I couldn't tell yet. But I took a photo with my phone. Those 8 people would get very close scrutiny. Daniel noticed. Making enemies on day one? Making priorities, I corrected. The people defending Pat before they know what she's accused of? They're either loyal or complicit, I'll figure out which. My new office still smelled like Pat Reynolds' perfume, something expensive and cloying. I opened the windows despite the late August heat, needing to clear the air literally and figuratively. The desk drawers were empty. The computer had been wiped. Even the filing cabinets contained nothing but blank folders and old office supply catalogs. She tried to delete everything, David Chin from IT said, appearing in my doorway with a laptop. Got about 60% through the process before Mr. Thornton's order came through. I was able to recover most of it. Most? Everything from the last 6 months is intact. Older files are fragmentary, enough to show they existed, not always enough to show what they contained. I took the laptop. This is perfect, David. Thank you. There's something else. He glanced over his shoulder, then closed my office door. Ms. Reynolds had admin access to systems she shouldn't have touched. Not just accounting. HR, payroll, even some executive communications. I flagged it months ago, but she claimed it was necessary for her role. Let me guess. No documentation of that necessity. None. And here's the weird part. She mostly didn't use that access. Just logged in occasionally, viewed a few files, logged out. Like she was checking on something specific. Surveillance. Pat had been monitoring the company for someone, for Tori. Can you trace what files she accessed? Already done. David handed me a printed report. Mostly board meeting minutes, executive compensation records, and vendor contract negotiations. Nothing that would help her do her actual job, but everything that would help someone stage a corporate coup, I finished. Or embezzle without getting caught. David, I need you to do something for me. Can you set up monitoring on Pat's network access? I want to know every time she logs in, what she views, how long she stays. She's supposed to be locked out. She's supposed to be, but if someone gave her admin access once, they might have created backdoors. Assume she can still get in and track accordingly. David nodded slowly. You think she's going to try to destroy evidence? I think she's going to try to save herself. And desperate people make mistakes we can exploit. After David left, I dove into the recovered files. The patterns emerged quickly once I knew what to look for. Blackwell Media Solutions, owned by Michael Blackwell, Tori's brother. $15 million in payments over 18 months for strategic marketing consulting. When I cross-referenced those dates with actual marketing campaigns, there was zero correlation. Morrison Development, Tyler's company, $12 million in advance payments for construction projects. Average completion rate 18%. And then the most interesting pattern. Every fraudulent payment was processed on Friday afternoons between 2 and 4 p.m., approved only by Pat Reynolds and Tori Blackwell, bypassing the standard 3-signature requirement for amounts over $1 million. This wasn't sloppy embezzlement. This was systematic, calculated theft. My phone buzzed. Tyler from yet another new number. We need to talk. This is insane. I blocked the number and kept working. By 5 p.m., I'd received 14 calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I'd blocked 12 of them. The 13th was from a 914 area code, Westchester County. I answered, "Rebecca Thornton." "Jesus Christ, you actually did it." Tyler's voice was ragged. "You married him. You actually fucking married Daniel Thornton. Is there something you need, or are you just calling to state the obvious? What I need is for you to stop this insane revenge fantasy before you destroy both our lives." I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the Manhattan skyline turning gold in the late afternoon sun. "My life was already destroyed, Tyler. You filed for divorce without telling me, forged my signature on legal documents, and stole everything I'd built. What exactly do I have left to lose?" "Becca." His voice cracked. "I didn't want to do it this way. Tori said it was the only option, that you'd never agree to a fair split." "A fair split?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "I gave up my career for you, liquidated my retirement, worked 18-hour days for 5 years building your company. And your idea of a fair split is you keep everything while I get nothing?" "The post-nuptial agreement was legitimate. You signed it. To protect us from a lawsuit that never existed. You lied to me, Tyler, about the lawsuit, about the bankruptcy, about everything." I pulled up the file I'd been building on Morrison Development. "But let's talk about your current legal problems. Specifically, the $5 million you received from Thornton Maritime for warehouse renovations that were never started." Silence. Then, "I'm waiting on materials. Supply chain delays. You know how it is. The project was supposed to start 4 months ago. According to the site supervisor I spoke with today, your company hasn't even submitted final plans. There's no crew, no equipment, no materials ordered. Just $5 million of Thornton Maritime's money sitting in your accounts." "You're working for him." Tyler's voice shifted, became harder. "You're actually helping Daniel Thornton come after me. After us. Do you have any idea what Tori will do when she realizes you're targeting her?" "I imagine she'll do what guilty people always do, panic, make mistakes, and eventually get caught. She's not just going to let you audit her into prison, Becca. She's dangerous. She has connections, resources. So do I now." I watched the sunset paint the buildings across from me in shades of orange and red. "I have access to every financial record, every transaction, every email, and I'm very, very good at finding things people want to hide. You taught me that, actually. You hid our divorce for 3 weeks. I never suspected a thing. That was impressive. Becca, please. The $5 million you took? I'm filing a formal demand for return of funds tomorrow. If Morrison Development can't produce proof of work completion or return the money within 72 hours, I'm referring the case to federal prosecutors. Wire fraud, Tyler. That's 10 to 20 years." I heard something crash in the background. "You have 72 hours to figure out if protecting Tori is worth a decade in federal prison. Choose wisely." I hung up and immediately called Kate Brooks, the private investigator Daniel had hired. "I need you to put surveillance on Tyler Morrison. As of this call, he's officially desperate. Desperate people either run or lash out. I need to know which he chooses." The next 10 days passed in a blur of spreadsheets, bank statements, and increasingly cold takeout food. I assembled a team, 3 junior analysts from departments with no connection to Pat Reynolds, plus David Chin from IT. We worked 16-hour days, rarely seeing daylight, building a case one transaction at a time. "Look at this pattern," I told the team during a midnight work session. Chinese food containers littered the conference table. Every suspicious payment happens Friday afternoon. Why? "End of week," offered James Park, one of my analysts. "People are tired, want to go home. Less scrutiny on approvals." "Exactly, and notice the amounts. They're always just under the threshold that requires board review. 1.8 million, 2.2 million. Never quite hitting the 3 million trigger." "Someone studied our financial controls very carefully," said Michelle Torres, my other analyst. "They knew exactly how to stay under the radar." "Which means this wasn't opportunistic fraud. This was planned, systematic." I pulled up the email threads Emma Wilson had provided. And the same people were involved every time. Pat Reynolds initiated, Tori Blackwell approved, money flowed out within 48 hours. Where did it go after it left Thornton Maritime? James asked. That's where it gets interesting. I displayed a flowchart I'd been building. Morrison Development keeps 30%. Blackwell Media Solutions keeps 20%. The remaining 50% gets moved through 3 shell companies, then offshore to the Cayman Islands. Whose accounts in the Caymans? That's what Kate Brooks is trying to determine, but I'm betting they're controlled by Tory. I sat back, rubbing my tired eyes. We're close. We have the pattern, we have the amounts, we have the approval chain. What we need is proof that Tory orchestrated the entire scheme. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Still here? Where else would I be? 30th floor. I have food that's actually hot. I found him in his office, which at 11 p.m. felt less like a corporate command center and more like a comfortable living room. He'd dimmed the lights and jazz played softly from hidden speakers. The conference table held Thai food, proper plates, not containers. You need to eat real food, he said, gesturing to a chair, and possibly sleep. I'll sleep when we've nailed Tory. But I sat down and accepted the plate he offered. Pad Thai, spring rolls, green curry that actually smelled fresh. How did you know I like Thai? I pay attention. He sat across from me with his own plate. What did you find today? I briefed him on the payment patterns, the shell companies, the systematic nature of the theft. As I talked, I watched his expression shift from interested to grimly satisfied. 35 million over 3 years, he said when I finished. That's more than I suspected. And we haven't found everything yet. There are other vendors I'm still investigating. I pulled out my tablet, showed him the list. These companies all have red flags. Addresses that don't exist, owners who can't be traced, services that were never actually rendered. Can you prove it all in court? Give me another week. I met his eyes. I know you want to move faster, but if we go to the board with a weak case, Tory walks. I need to make this airtight. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, studying his wine glass. You know what I realized today? I've been investigating Tory's theft for 6 months. I hired 3 different forensic accounting firms before you. None of them found what you've found in 10 days. They weren't motivated. No, they were afraid. He looked up at me. Tory has a reputation in this industry. She destroys people who cross her. Careers, reputations, sometimes worse. The firms I hired were thorough enough to look competent, but careful not to find anything that would make them targets. And you think I'm not afraid? I think you're more afraid of being weak than you are of being destroyed. His gaze was uncomfortably perceptive. I think Tyler's betrayal hurt worse than anything Tory could do to you now. He wasn't wrong. I thought about the woman I'd been a month ago, trusting, eager to please, willing to sacrifice anything for love. That woman had died the moment I saw the forged signature on my divorce papers. You hired me for revenge, I said quietly. You're getting your money's worth. I hired you because you're brilliant and you have nothing left to lose. He paused, but I'm hoping you're starting to realize you have something to gain. Like what? Like respect, power, a career that's yours, not built in someone else's shadow. He gestured around his office. You're good at this, Rebecca. Not just the accounting, the strategy, the psychology, reading people. You could run any company's finance department in New York. After this case, you'll be able to write your own ticket. It was seductive, that vision of myself, not as someone's wife or someone's helper, but as a force in my own right. First, I have to survive the board meeting, I said. Then we can talk about my brilliant future. Fair enough? Daniel raised his glass. To surviving. I clinked mine against his. To surviving. We'd been married 2 weeks before we had our first real conversation. It happened at midnight on a Saturday when I stumbled home after a 20-hour day to find Daniel in the kitchen making tea. Still in his dress shirt and pants, tie gone, looking almost human. You're going to burn out, he said, handing me a mug without being asked. I'm used to long hours. Deloitte trained me well. Deloitte didn't train you to go up against someone actively trying to destroy you. Tori's not a difficult audit client. She's an enemy. I sat at the kitchen island, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. The penthouse was quiet, peaceful. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the lights of Manhattan glittering like a field of stars. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Why did you really marry Tori? I read the tabloid stories, but they're mostly speculation." Daniel was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Her family's shipping connections. My company needed access to European markets, and the Blackwell name opened doors I couldn't open alone." He smiled without humor. "It was a business arrangement from the start. Very cordial, very practical. We understood each other." "What changed?" "She wanted children. I didn't. We agreed to table the discussion for 5 years, focus on growing the company." He stared into his tea. "Then I found out she'd been skimming money for 2 years. Not for herself, for her brother, who'd gotten into debt with some very bad people. She was using my company as a personal ATM to save him." "You could have fired her. She was a shareholder, and more than that." He paused. "I still cared about her, even after I knew what she was doing. I thought we could fix it, work through it. So I covered for her, paid off Michael's debts, tried to move forward. But she kept stealing." "She kept stealing. Only this time she wasn't saving her brother. She was building an escape fund, planning to leave once she'd taken enough. She didn't want to fix our marriage. She wanted to bleed me dry and disappear." His voice was flat, emotionless. "That's when I filed for divorce. I thought about Tyler, about all the times I'd made excuses for him, covered for his failures, convinced myself he'd change. We'd both loved people who saw us as assets to be exploited." "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. I learned an important lesson. Never trust someone who treats marriage like a business contract." He looked at me, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "Which makes our arrangement rather ironic, doesn't it?" "We were honest about it being a contract," I pointed out. "There's a difference between a pragmatic partnership and a con disguised as love." "Is there? Or are we just better at lying to ourselves?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to examine. "I should get some sleep," I said finally. "Big week ahead." "Rebecca?" He caught my hand as I stood. The touch was brief, almost accidental, but I felt it like an electric shock. "Thank you for taking this risk, for trusting me even though you have every reason not to trust anyone." "I don't trust you," I admitted. "But I trust your anger. I understand wanting to destroy someone who destroyed you." "And after Tori's destroyed, what then?" I didn't have an answer. The breakthrough came on Monday morning, delivered by the most unexpected source. A knock on my office door, tentative and nervous. A young woman stood there, early 20s, dark hair in a professional bun, clutching a folder like a life preserver. "Mrs. Thornton, I'm Emma Wilson. I worked for Mrs. Reynolds." She glanced over her shoulder. "Can I close the door?" "Of course." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, my pulse quickening. Witnesses who came forward voluntarily were gold. "What can I do for you?" "I have information about the fraud. Real information, not the stuff people are making up." She set the folder on my desk but didn't let go of it. "But I need to know I'll be protected. Ms. Reynolds is dangerous. She's threatened people before." "Threatened how?" "My ex-boyfriend got fired from his startup 3 days after I went to the compliance hotline about irregular payments. Pat sent me a text that said, 'Sorry about David. Job market's tough.' She knew I'd reported her, and she wanted me to know she could hurt people I cared about. Classic intimidation. Did you report the threat?" "Who would I report it to? Pat controls half the HR department. They're her people." Emma finally opened the folder, spreading documents across my desk. "These are emails between Pat and someone she calls TB. I'm assuming Tori Blackwell. They discuss payment timing, approval workflows, how to bypass controls." I scanned the emails, my training automatically cataloging the important details. Dates, amounts, implicit admissions of wrongdoing. This was exactly what I needed. Direct communication showing conspiracy. "Emma, these are incredibly valuable. Why come forward now?" "Because I'm tired of being scared." She met my eyes, and despite the tremor in her voice, I saw steel underneath. "And because my mom always taught me that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. This is the right thing. Do. I spent the next hour taking her formal statement, getting every detail documented. When she left, with David Walsh, our legal counsel, to arrange witness protection, I sat alone in my office and looked at the evidence she'd provided. We had them, Pat and Tori, caught in their own words. The trap came the next evening, delivered with perfect timing to seem organic. I was in the parking garage at 7 p.m., exhausted from another long day, when I heard footsteps echoing across the concrete. Pat Reynolds emerged from behind a pillar, her expression carefully neutral. Every instinct screamed danger. I shifted my weight, kept the car between us, phone ready in my pocket. "Mrs. Thornton," Pat said, stopping a careful distance away. "I was hoping we could talk." "We can talk in my office, with HR and legal present." "Please, just 5 minutes." She held up empty hands. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to offer my cooperation." Cooperation. "I know what Emma told you. I know you've seen the emails." Pat's professional mask cracked slightly. "Tori's already cutting me loose. Her lawyer sent a letter yesterday making it clear I'm on my own. I can't afford to go down for this alone." I studied her carefully. She looked genuinely scared, but so had Tyler when he'd asked me to sign those post-nuptial papers. "What exactly are you offering?" I asked. "Everything. All the documentation, all the communications, access codes to offshore accounts, names of everyone else involved." She stepped closer. "I want immunity and severance, 2 years' salary. In exchange, I'll give you enough evidence to send Tori to prison for 20 years. It was too perfect, too convenient, too exactly what I needed. "Why now?" I asked. "You've had weeks to come forward." "Because I thought Tori would protect me. I was wrong." Pat's voice dropped. "Look, I made bad choices. I got greedy, but I'm not going down alone for something she orchestrated. I can give you recorded conversations, bank transfers, everything you need to prove she planned the whole thing. And all I have to do is give you immunity. And a severance package. I have kids in college, Mrs. Thornton. I need something to land on when this is over." The desperation seemed real. The offer seemed genuine, which was exactly why I didn't trust it. "Bring everything to my office tomorrow morning at 7, I said finally. "We'll review it together. If it's as valuable as you claim, I'll talk to counsel about a deal." Relief flooded Pat's face. "Thank you. You won't regret this." "I hope not." As soon as I was in the car with doors locked, I called Daniel. "Pat just approached me with an offer to flip on Tori. It's a trap." "You're certain?" "The timing is too convenient. The offer is too perfect, and Pat's never been good at hiding her tells." She kept glancing past me like she was checking if someone was watching. I pulled out of the parking garage. "This has Tori's fingerprints all over it. She's trying to figure out what evidence I actually have." "So what do we do?" "We give Pat exactly what she wants. False information that will lead Tori in completely the wrong direction." I spent that night creating an elaborate fiction. Fake bank statements showing money flowing through account numbers I invented. False witness testimony implicating people who didn't exist. Fabricated email threads that told a story different from reality. If Pat was going to spy on my case, I'd give her a case worth spying on. Thursday afternoon, 4 p.m. The boardroom on the 31st floor felt like a courtroom. 12 board members sat around the massive table, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. And at the far end, looking impeccable in a cream Chanel suit, sat Tori Blackwell. She smiled when I entered. It was the smile of a predator confident in her superiority. I set down 3 banker's boxes of evidence and connected my laptop to the projection system. "Let's begin," Daniel said from the head of the table. "Rebecca has completed her preliminary forensic audit. I've asked her to present her findings directly to the board so you can evaluate the evidence and vote on recommended actions." I pulled up my first slide. Forensic audit findings, systematic embezzlement 2021 to 2024. Tori's smile faltered. For the next 30 minutes, I walked them through everything. The payment patterns, always Friday afternoons, always just under review thresholds. The shell companies, Blackwell Media Solutions, Morrison Development, 3 others with fake addresses and untraceable owners. The approval chain irregularities, Only 2 signatures when policy required 3. I showed them numbers that couldn't be argued with, patterns that couldn't be explained away, emails that told a story of deliberate theft. The total amount embezzled over 3 years is approximately $35 million, I concluded. The scheme involved bypassing financial controls, creating fraudulent vendor relationships, and using offshore accounts to hide the stolen funds. Richard Chin, the most senior board member, spoke first. These are serious allegations, Mrs. Thornton. What proof do you have that Miss Blackwell orchestrated this? I pulled up Emma Wilson's emails. These communications show Ms. Blackwell directing the timing and amounts of fraudulent transfers. She used her board privileges to bypass normal approval processes. Those could be fabricated, Tori interjected smoothly. Emma Wilson is disgruntled. She was terminated for poor performance last year. She was pressured to resign after reporting irregularities through our compliance hotline, I corrected. And the emails have been authenticated by IT. Server logs, IP addresses, timestamps all confirm they're genuine. Circumstantial evidence assembled by someone with an obvious bias. Everyone knows you married Daniel to get access to this company. This is a witch hunt against your husband's ex-wife. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. I took a breath, keeping my voice level. My personal relationship with Mr. Thornton doesn't change the mathematics. $35 million is missing. The evidence shows where it went. Perhaps you're misinterpreting legitimate business expenses due to your inexperience with our industry. Then explain why your brother received $15 million for marketing services with 0 deliverables. I cut her off. Explain why Morrison Development received $5 million for work that was never started. Explain why these transactions all bypassed mandatory approval processes. My brother's company can provide documentation. Your brother is currently meeting with an asset protection attorney about moving $30 million offshore. I pulled up Kate Brooks' surveillance photos. These were taken this morning. That's Michael Blackwell entering a firm that specializes in hiding assets from litigation. The room erupted in murmurs. You had me followed? Tori demanded, color rising in her cheeks. I had your co-conspirator followed, and what we found is consciousness of guilt. Innocent people don't panic move $30 million offshore. I've heard enough, said Richard Chen. I move that we vote on CFO Thornton's recommendations. Daniel stood. First vote, terminate Patricia Reynolds for cause, effective immediately. All in favor? 10 hands rose. 2 abstentions. None against. Second vote, grant CFO Thornton full authority to freeze accounts, suspend vendors, and make personnel changes necessary to remediate control failures. All in favor? 9 hands up. 3 abstentions. None against. Third vote, authorize criminal referral to federal law enforcement regarding the embezzlement and money laundering detailed in this report. Tori stood abruptly. You cannot be serious. You're going to involve the FBI based on circumstantial evidence? I'm going to involve the FBI because $35 million of shareholder money is missing, and every piece of evidence points to systematic fraud. Daniel's voice was ice. If you're innocent, Ms. Blackwell, you'll welcome the opportunity to clear your name. All in favor? Richard Chen called. 11 hands went up. Only Tori voted against. Motion passes. Daniel turned to Tori. Ms. Blackwell, your board seat is suspended immediately. You're barred from all company premises except official shareholder meetings. Tori gathered her purse, her movements sharp with controlled fury. You'll regret this, all of you. My lawyers will destroy this company. She swept out, heels clicking sharply on marble. After the door closed, Richard Chen turned to me. That took courage, Mrs. Thornton. I hope your evidence holds up. It will, I said, and meant it. As board members filed out, Daniel came over and squeezed my shoulder briefly. The gesture was subtle but significant. We'd won the first battle. But looking at Tori's empty chair, I knew the real war was just beginning. The email arrived at 6:47 p.m. on Friday, exactly 72 hours after the board meeting. It went to every employee at Thornton Maritime, all 2,400 of them. Subject line, the truth about your new CFO. I was still at the office when my phone started buzzing with texts from people I barely knew. Have you seen this? Is this real? OMG, Rebecca. I'm so sorry. I opened the email. The video started with footage of me entering a hotel in Midtown, the Marriott where I'd met a client 3 years ago for a Deloitte audit. The video was edited to make it look suspicious, me glancing around nervously, checking my phone, hurrying through the lobby like I had something to hide. Then, audio played over the footage. A woman's voice, digitally altered but clearly meant to sound like me. I've been planning this for months. Daniel Thornton is worth $400 million. Once I'm his wife, I'll have access to everything. A man's voice. What about your husband? Tyler? The fake Rebecca laughed. He's useful for now, but once I don't need him anymore. The video cut to more hotel footage, more suspicious behavior, interspersed with fabricated text messages supposedly from my phone. Messages about seducing Daniel, stealing company secrets, plotting to frame Tori Blackwell for crimes she didn't commit. The final screen showed a message in bold red letters. Rebecca Morrison is a gold-digging fraud. She married the chairman to steal his fortune and destroy his ex-wife. Don't let her get away with it. My hands were shaking when I finished watching. Not from fear, from pure, incandescent rage. This was sophisticated. The video editing was professional, the audio deepfake convincing enough to fool anyone who didn't know it was fake. Tori had spent serious money on this. My office door burst open. Daniel stood there, tablet in hand, his face darker than I'd ever seen it. "I've called the lawyers," he said without preamble. "This is defamation, invasion of privacy, possibly criminal harassment. We'll bury whoever made this." It was Tori. I stood up, pacing to the window. This is exactly her style. Can't fight the evidence, so attack the messenger. Make me look like a scheming gold digger, discredit everything I've found. It's working. Daniel pulled up his phone, showed me the company Slack. Half the employees are defending you, half are saying they always knew something was off. Social media is already picking it up. There's a Twitter thread with 15,000 retweets calling you the real housewife of corporate fraud. I closed my eyes, fighting back the hot sting of tears. I'd built my entire career on my reputation, 15 years of credibility, of being known as thorough and ethical and incorruptible, and Tori had shredded it in 6 minutes of edited video. Rebecca. Daniel's hand landed on my shoulder, gentle but grounding. Look at me. I turned. His expression was fierce, protective in a way that made my chest ache. This is noise, he said. Desperate noise from someone who knows she's lost. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable for a few days. Yes, people are going to whisper and speculate, but the evidence doesn't lie. The board voted based on facts, not gossip. The FBI doesn't care about viral videos. The FBI doesn't, I said quietly. But juries do. If this goes to trial, Tori's lawyers will use this video to paint me as a bitter ex-wife with an agenda. They'll say I fabricated evidence to frame her. Then we prove the video is fake. We show the metadata, the editing artifacts, the inconsistencies. He squeezed my shoulder. You've spent 3 weeks proving Tori is a thief. We'll spend 1 week proving she's also a liar, and then we'll destroy her. I made it home to the penthouse before I broke down. Daniel had offered to come with me, but I'd insisted I was fine. Needed space. Wanted to be alone. All lies. The moment I closed the bedroom door behind me, I collapsed onto the bed and sobbed. Not delicate tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook my entire body. All the rage and humiliation and exhaustion of the past month came pouring out in a flood I couldn't control. I'd sacrificed everything for Tyler. My career, my savings, my sense of self. And he'd thanked me by stealing it all and handing it to another woman. I'd fought back. I'd been smart, strategic, professional. I'd built an airtight case using every skill I'd learned in 15 years of forensic accounting. And my reward was being called a gold-digging whore on the internet. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. Cried for the naive woman who'd believed in love and partnership. Cried for the professional reputation I'd spent 15 years building. Cried for the exhaustion of constantly having to prove myself, to fight for respect that men received automatically. A soft knock on the door. Rebecca? I sat up quickly, wiping my face. I'm fine, just tired. The door opened anyway. Daniel stood there holding 2 glasses of wine, his tie gone, his expression impossibly gentle. You don't have to be fine, he said. Not with me. That simple permission broke something open in my chest. Fresh tears spilled over, and I didn't try to hide them. Daniel set down the wine and sat beside me on the bed. Not too close, respecting my space, but near enough that I could feel his presence like an anchor. I'm so tired, I whispered. I'm tired of fighting, tired of being strong, tired of men destroying me and getting away with it. They're not getting away with it. We're going to win this. Are we? I looked at him, searching his face for certainty I didn't feel. Or are we just making it worse? Tori has unlimited resources, no conscience, and nothing to lose. What if she keeps escalating? What if... Then we escalate faster. Daniel's voice was steel. You're not alone in this, Rebecca. You have me, and I have resources too. Money, lawyers, investigators, connections. Whatever Tori throws at us, we'll throw back twice as hard. Why? The question came out rawer than I intended. Why are you doing this? The audit is done. The board voted. You could distance yourself from me now. Protect your reputation. Because you're my wife. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Contract or not, you're my partner, and I don't abandon my partners when things get difficult. Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. This wasn't just about revenge against Tori anymore. This was something else. Something neither of us had planned for. Daniel, you don't have to say anything. Just... He handed me one of the wine glasses. Don't cry alone. We're in this together. We sat in silence, drinking wine, watching the lights of Manhattan through the floor-to-ceiling windows. And somehow, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. By Monday morning, Daniel had assembled a war room. His PR team, legal counsel, IT forensics experts, and a crisis management consultant who'd previously worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies sat around the conference table in his office. Show them, Daniel said to David Chin. David pulled up the video on the main screen. This is the defamatory content that was sent to all employees Friday evening. I've spent the weekend analyzing it. Here's what I found. He zoomed in on various sections, highlighting digital artifacts. The footage of Mrs. Thornton entering the hotel is real. It's from security cameras at the Marriott Marquis 3 years ago, but it's been re-edited. See this timestamp? It jumps from 2:47 to 2:51, skipping 4 minutes. In the original footage, which I obtained from the hotel, those 4 minutes show Mrs. Thornton meeting with 3 other people, clearly a business meeting. And the audio? Asked Melissa Grant, the crisis consultant. Complete fabrication. Voice cloning technology, probably using samples from her presentations and meetings. David played a comparison analysis. The vocal patterns don't match Mrs. Thornton's natural speech rhythms, and there are digital artifacts consistent with AI-generated audio. Can we prove it's fake? Daniel asked. Absolutely. I can provide a full forensic report that will stand up in court. This was created using commercially available deepfake software, and the person who made it wasn't careful about hiding their tracks. Melissa leaned forward. Can we trace it back to who created it? Working on it. The email originated from a server in Eastern Europe. Classic misdirection. But the video file metadata shows it was created on a MacBook Pro registered to someone named Carson Mitchell. I frowned. I don't know anyone by that name. You wouldn't. Carson Mitchell is a pseudonym for a digital marketing consultant who specializes in reputation destruction. He's been sued twice before for creating similar deepfakes. David pulled up a profile. And according to his bank records, which I obtained through entirely legal discovery channels, he received a payment of $50,000 last Tuesday from a shell company called Helix Consulting. Let me guess, I said. Helix Consulting is owned by Tori or one of her associates. Owned by Michael Blackwell, Tori's brother, same Michael who's been laundering money through Blackwell Media Solutions. Daniel smiled grimly. So we can prove the video is fake, and we can prove Tori paid to have it created. That's defamation and conspiracy. More than that, said David Walsh, the legal counsel. It's witness intimidation. Mrs. Thornton is a witness in an ongoing federal investigation. Creating false evidence to discredit her testimony is a federal crime. I want all of this documented and sent to the FBI by end of day, Daniel ordered. Melissa, I need a press strategy. We're not going to let Tori control the narrative. Melissa nodded. I recommend a press conference, Mrs. Thornton presents the forensic analysis proving the video is fake, discusses the evidence of embezzlement in clinical terms, and positions herself as a whistleblower being attacked for telling the truth. We make Tori look desperate and criminal. When? I asked. Tomorrow. Strike while the video is still trending. Show people the truth before the lies have time to solidify. I looked at Daniel. Are you sure about this? Going public will put both of us under more scrutiny. I'm sure, he said. Tori wants to make this about your character. We're going to make it about her crimes. By the time we're done, she won't just lose her freedom. She'll lose her reputation, her wealth, and everything else she stole. The call came from Kate Brooks at 11 p.m. that night. I have someone who wants to talk to you, she said without preamble. Michael Blackwell, Tori's brother. He's scared and he wants to make a deal. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Where are you? Neutral location, coffee shop in Brooklyn, late night crowd for cover. He approached me 30 minutes ago, says he can't go to the police directly because Tori has connections in NYPD. He wants to talk to you first. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I threw on clothes and was heading for the door when I nearly collided with Daniel in the hallway. He was in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair disheveled from sleep. Where are you going? Michael Blackwell wants to talk. He's ready to flip on Tori. Daniel grabbed his phone and keys. I'm coming with you. You don't have to. Rebecca. He caught my arm gently. Yes, I do. We're partners, remember? We do this together. The coffee shop was a hipster place in Williamsburg, all exposed brick and vintage furniture, populated by artists and night shift workers. Michael Blackwell sat in the back corner, hunched over a cold cup of coffee, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. He was younger than I expected, early 30s, with Tori's sharp features but none of her polished confidence. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his hands shook slightly as he stood to greet us. Mrs. Thornton, Mr. Thornton. He glanced nervously at Kate, who stood watch by the front door. Thank you for coming. You wanted to talk, I said, sitting across from him. We're listening. Tori's going to kill me when she finds out I'm here. He laughed bitterly. Maybe literally. She's not stable right now. After the board meeting, she went crazy, throwing things, screaming, making threats. Threats against whom? Everyone. You, Daniel, the board members who voted against her, Emma Wilson especially. Tori's obsessed with her, keeps saying Emma betrayed the company. He took a shaky breath. But mostly she's angry at me. Says I'm weak, that I should have been more careful with the money laundering, that if we go down it's my fault. Is she planning something? Daniel asked sharply. She's liquidating everything. Sold her properties in Miami and the Hamptons last week. Got $30 million cash. She's planning to wire it offshore Friday afternoon, then take a private jet to the Cayman Islands that night. He pulled out his phone, showed us a screenshot of a flight itinerary. Once she's there, she'll disappear. She has contacts, fake identities prepared. You'll never find her. Friday, 4 days from now. Why are you telling us this? I asked. Because I'm not going to prison for 20 years while she lives on a beach somewhere. Michael's voice hardened. I got into debt gambling. Stupid, I know. Tori said she'd help me. Said we'd skim a little from Thornton Maritime, pay off my debts, then stop. But she didn't stop. She kept taking more, and I kept helping because I was terrified of what she'd do if I refused. Did she threaten you? She showed me what she did to people who crossed her. There was a board member at Thornton Maritime 5 years ago, Richard Peterson. He questioned some of Tori's expenditures. 2 weeks later, his daughter got arrested for drug possession, drugs that were planted in her car by someone Tori hired. The daughter went to rehab, Richard resigned from the board, and the questions stopped. I felt cold. You can prove this? I can prove Tori bragged about it. Whether that's enough for a conviction, I don't know, but I can prove the money laundering. I have records of every transaction, every account, every shell company, everything you need to trace the $35 million back to her. In exchange for what? Daniel asked. Immunity from prosecution. Witness protection if necessary, and I want my family protected, my wife, my 2 kids. Tori knows where they live if she thinks I've turned on her." He didn't finish the sentence. Daniel and I exchanged a glance. This was it, the inside witness we needed. With Michael's testimony and documentation, we could build a case that Tori couldn't escape. "I'll call the FBI," I said. "But Michael, once you start cooperating, there's no going back. Tori will know immediately and she'll retaliate. Are you prepared for that?" "I'm prepared to not spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Everything else, I'll deal with." He slid a USB drive across the table. "This is everything. Account numbers, transaction records, recordings of conversations with Tori. It's enough to bury her." I took the drive. "We'll get you protection. Tonight. You're not going home." The FBI agent arrived at the coffee shop within an hour. A woman in her 40s named Special Agent Sarah Chin, with sharp eyes and an efficient manner. "Mr. Blackwell, I understand you want to provide information about a money laundering operation," she said, settling into the booth beside Michael. "I want immunity first," Michael said immediately. "That's not how this works. You provide information, we evaluate its value, then we discuss deals." Agent Chin pulled out a recorder. "But I can tell you that cooperation generally results in reduced charges. Full immunity is rare, but possible in cases where the defendant provides substantial assistance." Michael looked at me desperately. "Will I go to prison?" "Probably," I said honestly. "But a few years with cooperation is better than 20 without, and your family will be safe, which is what matters most." He nodded slowly, then began talking. For the next 3 hours, Michael detailed the entire operation, how Tori had recruited him after his gambling debts spiraled, how they'd set up shell companies to process fraudulent invoices, how Pat Reynolds had been brought in to approve transactions without oversight, how Tyler Morrison had been added later once Tori started her affair with him and realized his construction company could be another laundering vehicle. "Tyler didn't know about the full scope at first," Michael explained. "He thought he was just inflating invoices a bit, standard industry practice. But once he was in deep enough, Tori showed him the real numbers. By then, he couldn't back out without incriminating himself." "Where's the money now?" Agent Chin asked. "Most of it's in Cayman accounts under shell company names. Some of it's in cryptocurrency. Tori's been converting cash to Bitcoin over the past month, probably planning to use it once she's offshore." He pulled up his phone, showed transaction records. "She has about 40 million total, including the 30 from selling her properties." 40 million, more than I'd calculated. Tori had been stealing for longer than I'd thought. "Can you freeze the accounts before Friday?" I asked Agent Chin. "We can try, but international asset seizure is complicated, requires cooperation from foreign governments, time-consuming legal processes. If the money's in the Cayman Islands, we're looking at weeks of red tape minimum." "We don't have weeks," Daniel said. "We have 4 days." "Then we need to stop the wire transfer before it leaves the U.S., Agent Chin said. "That we can do. If we can show probable cause that the funds represent proceeds of criminal activity, we can get a court order to freeze the accounts domestically." "I can provide probable cause," I said, holding up the USB drive. "Forensic accounting analysis showing the money trail from Thornton Maritime through shell companies to Tori's accounts, plus Michael's testimony, plus the documents Emma Wilson provided. That's more than enough for probable cause." Agent Chin nodded. "All right, I'll coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We'll prepare emergency motions to freeze the accounts and prevent any international transfers. But Mrs. Thornton, we'll need you to testify to the financial analysis. Can you be available Thursday for a hearing?" "Absolutely." "Good. In the meantime, Mr. Blackwell, you're coming with me. We're putting you in protective custody until we can arrange formal witness security." She stood, gesturing to 2 other agents who'd been waiting outside. "Pack a bag. You're not going home." After they left, Daniel and I sat in the now empty coffee shop, both of us processing what had just happened. "We're really doing this," I said quietly. "We're taking down Tori." "You sound surprised." "I am, a little. A month ago, I was just trying to survive my divorce. Now I'm coordinating with the FBI to stop an international money laundering operation." Daniel reached across the table, took my hand. "A month ago, you were surviving. Now you're winning. There's a difference. His hand was warm, solid, real. I realized I'd started thinking of him not as a business partner or a means to an end, but as someone I trusted, someone I needed. Thank you, I said, for everything, for believing me, for supporting me, for being your husband? He smiled slightly. That's the arrangement. It's more than that now. You know it is. The air between us shifted, charged with something we'd both been carefully avoiding. His thumb traced small circles on the back of my hand. Rebecca, my phone buzzed, shattering the moment. A text from Kate. Tyler just showed up at your old apartment in Queens. He's trying to break in. Police on the way, but thought you should know. Damn it, I muttered, showing Daniel the message. He's spiraling. Or Tori sent him to look for something. Documents, evidence, anything he can use against you. There's nothing there. I took everything important when I left. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Had I? Or had I been too emotional, too hurt to think clearly? We should go, Daniel said. Make sure. We arrived at my old apartment in Queens to find 2 police cars parked outside and Tyler in handcuffs sitting on the curb. He looked terrible. Hair unwashed, clothes rumpled, eyes wild with desperation or drugs or both. When he saw me step out of Daniel's car, his expression shifted from panic to rage. There she is, he shouted. The woman who destroyed my life. Are you happy now, Becca? Is this what you wanted? The police officer, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, turned to me. You're Rebecca Morrison? Rebecca Thornton now, I corrected. This is my ex-husband. I assume he was trying to break into my former apartment? Picked the lock, actually. Pretty sophisticated for a B&E. The officer gestured to Tyler. He says he was retrieving his own property. Is that true? Nothing in that apartment belongs to him. We've been divorced for over a month. He has no legal right to be here. Tyler struggled against his restraints. You stole everything from me. My company, my property, my future. I have a right to... You have a right to remain silent, the officer said dryly. I suggest you use it. What was he looking for? I asked the officer. He mentioned a safe, said there was a notebook inside with important business records. My blood went cold. The safe. I'd forgotten about the small fireproof safe Tyler had insisted we install in the bedroom closet. He'd said it was for important documents, passports, birth certificates, that kind of thing. But what if he'd been storing something else? Evidence of his dealings with Tori. Can I check the apartment? I asked. It's still your rental, according to the landlord. Go ahead. Daniel and I went upstairs, leaving Tyler shouting threats and protests on the sidewalk. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it, half empty, depressing, full of memories I wanted to forget. The safe was in the bedroom closet, right where it had always been. The door hung open. Tyler had managed to get it unlocked before the police arrived. Inside was a black leather notebook. I pulled it out carefully, opened it. Tyler's handwriting filled every page. Dates, amounts, names. A complete record of every fraudulent transaction he'd processed for Tori. This is it, I breathed. This is the ledger. Every payment, every shell company, every time he inflated an invoice or filed a false report. It's all here. Daniel looked over my shoulder. Why would he keep this? Insurance. Tori was setting him up to take the fall, just like she did with Pat and Michael. Tyler must have realized it and started documenting everything so he'd have leverage if she tried to betray him. Which means this notebook could prove everything, not just Tyler's involvement, but Tori's orchestration of the entire scheme. There are notes here in Tyler's hand. TB called, said to increase Morrison invoice by $200,000. TB wants transfer moved to Friday to avoid board review. TB, Tori Blackwell. I flipped through the pages, my forensic accountant brain cataloging the evidence. This was better than emails, better than testimony. This was a contemporaneous record, created in real time, showing intent and coordination. We need to get this to the FBI, I said. Downstairs, Tyler was being loaded into a police car. When he saw me coming out with the notebook, his face went white. No, he said. Becca, please. That notebook. If Tori finds out I kept records, she'll kill me. I mean that literally. She's threatened. Then you should have thought of that before you committed federal crimes, I said coldly. Please, Tyler was shouting now, straining against the officers holding him. I'll testify. I'll give you everything. Just don't let her know about the notebook until I'm in protective custody. I hesitated. Tyler was a liar, a thief, a man who'd destroyed my life without hesitation. But the fear in his eyes was real. He's right about one thing, Daniel said quietly. If Tori finds out he's been documenting her crimes, she'll retaliate, and she's already shown she's willing to hurt innocent people. I looked at the notebook in my hands, then at Tyler's desperate face. Fine, I said. Officer, I'd like to request that my ex-husband be held on suicide watch for his own protection. He's expressed concerns about threats from associates in his criminal activities. The officer frowned. Suicide watch? He has a history of self-harm when under stress. I lied smoothly. I'd feel better knowing he was being monitored closely. Tyler's eyes widened in understanding. Suicide watch meant isolation, constant monitoring, exactly the kind of protection he needed from Tori's reach. Please, he whispered. I'll cooperate with everything. Just keep me safe. Then start cooperating now, I said. Tell me where Tori's planning to wire the money Friday. Which bank, which accounts? Global Trust Bank, Midtown Branch. She has a relationship with the branch manager, guy named Preston Walsh. She's planning to initiate the transfer at 3 p.m., just before the SWIFT system cutoff. Once it's through, the money's gone. Account numbers? Tyler rattled off a series of numbers, which I recorded on my phone. But Becca, she's not just moving money Friday. She's planning something else. Something big. I don't know what, but I heard her on the phone talking about handling the witness problem permanently. I think she's going after Emma Wilson. My stomach dropped. When? Before Friday. She wants Emma gone before any trial starts, before she can testify officially. I turned to the officer. I need to make a call, now. I dialed Agent Chin while Daniel called the security team watching Emma. Both conversations were short and urgent. Emma's secure, Daniel said after hanging up. The team is moving her to a safe house location immediately. Agent Chin is coordinating with local police for protective details on everyone involved in the case, I added. She's treating Tori as a flight risk and potential threat to witnesses. Tyler slumped in the police car, looking relieved and defeated. Thank you, he said quietly. I know you have no reason to help me, but thank you. I didn't respond. Saving Tyler wasn't about forgiveness or compassion. It was about making sure Tori went down for everything she'd done. And now, with Tyler's notebook in hand, I had everything I needed to ensure exactly that. Thursday morning, I walked into Global Trust Bank carrying a federal court order and a significant amount of righteous fury. The branch manager, Preston Walsh, impeccably dressed and professionally cordial, received me in his office with the kind of careful politeness that suggested he knew exactly why I was there. Mrs. Thornton, I understand you have some concerns about account activity. I have a federal court order freezing all accounts associated with Victoria Blackwell, Michael Blackwell, and their associated shell companies. I slid the document across his desk. Effective immediately, no transfers, no withdrawals, no activity of any kind until the ongoing criminal investigation is complete. Walsh's professionalism slipped slightly. This is highly irregular. We have procedures for this kind of— I'm aware of your procedures. I'm also aware that Victoria Blackwell has a personal relationship with you that may have influenced your handling of her accounts. I pulled out my tablet, showed him financial records. These transactions all bypassed standard review protocols. They were processed with unusual speed and minimal documentation. Care to explain? Walsh's face went pale. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Victoria Blackwell is under federal investigation for money laundering and embezzlement. This bank has processed millions in suspicious transactions. You personally approved many of them. The FBI will want to know whether you were negligent or complicit. I was following standard procedures. For a valued client who brought significant business to this branch, I understand. I leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. Victoria Blackwell will attempt to wire $30 million to the Cayman Islands tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. You're going to flag that transaction for compliance review the moment it hits your system. You're going to delay processing until the SWIFT cutoff at 3:30 p.m. And then you're going to inform the FBI that the attempted transfer has been blocked pending investigation. If I do that, Ms. Blackwell will what? Sue the bank for following federal law? Report you for complying with a court order? I smiled without warmth. Or will she threaten you the way she's threatened everyone else who stood in her way? If she does, I suggest you document those threats and report them immediately. Witness intimidation is a serious crime. Walsh stared at the court order, his hand trembling slightly. If I cooperate, will the FBI investigation into the bank's procedures conclude favorably? That depends on what the investigation finds, but cooperation is always looked upon favorably. I stood. I'll be monitoring these accounts personally tomorrow. I'll know if anything happens before the FBI arrives. Friday, 2:45 p.m. I sat in my office, monitoring the bank's transaction system on my laptop. Daniel was beside me, phone in hand, coordinating with Agent Chen. Kate Brooks was stationed near Global Trust Bank, ready to photograph Tori's arrival. Emma Wilson was safe in a secure location, guarded by federal marshals. Michael Blackwell was in witness protection, preparing his testimony. Tyler was in police custody, his notebook safely in FBI evidence storage. Everything was in place. At 2:52 p.m., my phone buzzed. Kate. She's here. Arriving in a town car carrying a briefcase. Looks calm. Of course she looked calm. Tori thought she was about to get away with everything. At 2:58 p.m., the banking system showed a pending transaction. Wire transfer. $30 million from Blackwell Holdings, LLC to Serenity Investments, Cayman Islands. Status, pending review. She's initiated the transfer, I told Daniel. Agent Chen is en route. ETA 5 minutes. At 3:10 p.m., the transaction status changed to under compliance hold, additional documentation required. It's blocked, I said, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. At 3:15 p.m., Kate sent a photo. Tori arguing with Preston Walsh through the glass walls of his office, her face flushed with anger, her calm mask completely gone. At 3:25 p.m., Agent Chen walked into Global Trust Bank with 4 other agents. At 3:30 p.m., the SWIFT system closed for the day. Tori's money was trapped in the United States, frozen by federal order, irrecoverable. My phone rang. Daniel answered, listened, then smiled grimly. They're taking her in for questioning. She's demanding her lawyer, threatening lawsuits, making a scene. Good, I said. Let her make a scene. Let everyone see who she really is. The official arrest came Saturday morning at Tori's mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. I watched it on the news, footage from a helicopter showing federal agents surrounding the property, Tori being let out in handcuffs, her expensive silk pajamas and designer sunglasses a stark contrast to the harsh reality of her situation. The charges scrolled across the bottom of the screen: money laundering, wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, witness tampering. Bail was set at $20 million. All her liquid assets were frozen. She couldn't make bail. Tori Blackwell, who'd spent years building an empire on stolen money and intimidation, spent her first night as a federal prisoner in a holding cell. Daniel and I watched the news coverage from the penthouse, both of us silent. It's over, he said finally. She's done. The trial hasn't even started. With Michael's testimony, Tyler's notebook, and your forensic analysis, she'll take a plea deal. 20 years minimum, probably more. He turned to me. You won, Rebecca. You destroyed everyone who tried to destroy you. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, satisfied. Instead, I felt empty. What happens now? I asked quietly. Daniel's expression shifted, became something softer and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen from him. That depends on you. On me? Our contract is complete. Tori's arrested, the company is secure, your revenge is accomplished. He took my hand gently. You can walk away now with full severance and a glowing reference. Start over somewhere new, build the career you deserve. I won't stop you. The offer hung between us, freedom Escape a clean slate, and I realized I didn't want it. Somewhere over the past month, between the late-night work sessions and the shared battles and the quiet moments of understanding, this had stopped being a contract. It had become something real. "What if I don't want to walk away?" I said. Daniel's hand tightened on mine. "Then stay. Not because of revenge or business arrangements. Stay because you want to. Because what we've built is worth keeping." I looked at him, really looked at him, saw past the cold corporate strategist to the man underneath. The man who'd protected me, believed in me, stood beside me when I had nothing and no one. "I'll stay," I said. "But Daniel, we need to renegotiate the contract." His eyebrows rose. "What terms did you have in mind?" "Something less transactional, less about revenge and more about partnership." I took a breath. More about two people who've learned to trust each other building something real." "That sounds like a marriage," he said softly. "A real one this time." Daniel pulled me close, and when he kissed me, it felt like the first honest thing that had happened since this whole mess began. Outside, Manhattan glittered with possibility. Inside, two broken people were learning how to be whole again. Together. The trial didn't happen quickly. Federal cases never do. 6 months of pretrial motions, discovery disputes, plea negotiations, and media circus. 6 months of me testifying before grand juries, sitting through depositions, and watching my forensic analysis get picked apart by defense attorneys who were paid obscene amounts to find any crack in my evidence. They found none. By March, Tyler had accepted a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison in exchange for his full cooperation and testimony against Tori. The judge was surprisingly sympathetic during sentencing, noting that Tyler had been manipulated by a more sophisticated criminal and had ultimately provided crucial evidence. I attended his sentencing, sat in the back of the courtroom while he stood before the judge, looking smaller and older than the man I'd married 10 years ago. "Mr. Morrison, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" the judge asked. Tyler turned to look at the gallery, his eyes finding mine. "I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was weak and greedy and stupid. I can't undo what I did to Rebecca, to my ex-wife. But I can accept responsibility and try to be better. I hope someday my parents can forgive me. I hope Rebecca can find peace." He didn't ask for my forgiveness. That, at least, showed some growth. After the hearing, I met briefly with Dorothy and Robert Morrison in the courthouse hallway. They'd aged years in months, but they hugged me tightly. "Thank you for not completely destroying him," Dorothy whispered. "I know you could have." "He's still their son," I told Daniel later in the car heading back to Manhattan. "And they're still good people who didn't deserve this." "You gave them monthly support throughout the investigation," Daniel pointed out. "Paid off the loan sharks, made sure they didn't lose their house. That's more grace than most people would show." "I'm not doing it for Tyler. I'm doing it because mercy doesn't make me weak." I looked out at the city passing by. Tori taught me that. She had no mercy, and it destroyed her. Tori's trial lasted 3 weeks in April. The prosecution presented Michael's testimony, Tyler's notebook, Emma Wilson's brave testimony about Pat Reynolds' intimidation, and my forensic analysis showing the flow of $35 million from Thornton Maritime through shell companies to offshore accounts. Tori's defense argued that she'd been set up by jealous colleagues, that the evidence was circumstantial, that Rebecca Thornton had fabricated documents to frame her ex-husband's mistress. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Guilty on all 15 counts. I was in my office when the verdict came in, preparing for a board meeting. My phone buzzed with the news alert, and I had to sit down as relief washed over me in waves. It was over. Actually, finally over. Daniel appeared in my doorway moments later. He didn't say anything, just pulled me into his arms and held me while I shook with emotions I couldn't name. "Sentencing is in 3 weeks," he said quietly. "The prosecution is recommending 18 to 25 years. With her age and the severity of the crimes, she'll likely die in prison." "Good," I said, and meant it. Tori had spent years destroying people without conscience. She'd threatened Emma, terrorized Pat into compliance, manipulated Michael and Tyler, and tried to crush me with lies and intimidation. She deserved every year of that sentence. 3 weeks after his sentencing, I did something unexpected. I visited Tyler in prison. The Federal Correctional Facility in Pennsylvania was nothing like the TV shows made it seem, more depressing and mundane than dangerous. Tyler sat across from me in the visitor's room, wearing prison khakis, his hands folded on the table between us. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I'm not here for you," I said bluntly. "I'm here for me. I need to say some things, and I need you to listen." "Okay." "You broke me, Tyler. Not just financially, that was bad enough. But you broke my trust in myself, made me question my judgment, my intelligence, my worth. I spent 10 years building you up, and you thanked me by stealing everything and disappearing with another woman." I kept my voice level, clinical. "I will never forgive you for that. Ever." He nodded slowly, not arguing. "But I also need to thank you." That made him look up, surprised. "You showed me who I really am. Not the woman who sacrifices everything for love. Not the enabler who makes excuses for someone else's failures. You showed me I'm strong enough to fight back, smart enough to win, and ruthless enough to destroy anyone who underestimates me." I smiled without warmth. "You created the woman who took down Tori Blackwell, so thank you for that." "Rebecca," his voice cracked, "I know this means nothing, but I am sorry. Genuinely, deeply sorry. You deserved so much better than what I gave you." Yes, I did. And now I have it. "Daniel Thornton." It wasn't a question. "Are you happy?" I thought about that. About the past 6 months living with Daniel, working beside him, building something that started as revenge and became partnership and was slowly becoming something more. "I'm getting there," I said honestly. "It's not the happy ending I imagined when I was 22 and thought love conquered everything. But it's real, and it's mine, and nobody can take it away from me." "Good. That's good." Tyler's eyes were wet. Would you tell my parents I'm okay? That I'm taking college courses, working in the library, trying to be better? I see them every month. I'll tell them." When I left the prison, I felt lighter. The rage that had driven me for months was finally gone, replaced by something calmer. Not forgiveness. I'd never forgive Tyler. But acceptance. He'd made his choices, and so had I. We were both living with the consequences. It happened on a Sunday evening in May, almost exactly 6 months after our wedding. I was packing, not obviously, just organizing my clothes a bit differently, moving some things into a suitcase instead of the drawers, making preparations to leave. The trial was over. Tori was in prison. Thornton Maritime's finances were stable, restructured, fraud-proof. My job as CFO was secure, respected, real. The contract was fulfilled, and I was terrified. Terrified because somewhere in the chaos of the past 6 months, I'd fallen in love with Daniel Thornton. Real love, not the naive infatuation I'd felt with Tyler. This was deeper, built on respect and partnership and trust earned through battle. But our arrangement had always been temporary, a business deal with an end date. And now that the business was concluded, staying felt like imposing, like I was taking advantage of his kindness by pretending we were a real couple when we'd started as a transaction. So I was preparing to leave, to give him his freedom before he felt obligated to keep me out of some misplaced sense of honor. "What are you doing?" I spun around. Daniel stood in the bedroom doorway, still in his suit from the office, his expression unreadable. "Organizing," I said too quickly. "Spring cleaning." "You're packing." He walked to the suitcase, looked at the carefully folded clothes inside. "You're leaving." "I thought the contract is complete. The trial's over. You don't need a wife anymore, and I don't need—" "What do you need, Rebecca?" He cut me off, his voice sharp. "Tell me what you need." "I need to not impose on you anymore." The words burst out before I could stop them. "I need to not be the charity case you married out of pity, the desperate ex-wife you saved from her own stupidity. I need to stand on my own and prove I'm not just someone who needs rescuing. Is that what you think this is? Daniel's face had gone hard. You think I've been tolerating you out of pity? Haven't you? Our marriage was a contract. Our marriage was a contract. He emphasized the past tense. It stopped being a contract about 4 months ago, around the time you started leaving your coffee mug in my office and I started programming the alarm system to your preferences without you asking. Around the time we stopped sleeping in separate bedrooms because being apart felt wrong. I blinked. He was right. We'd been sharing his bedroom for months now. When had that started? It had been so gradual, so natural, that I hadn't even noticed the shift. You said I could leave whenever I wanted, I said weakly. Clean break, no obligations. And you can. I meant that. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes intense. But, Rebecca, if you leave because you genuinely don't want to be here, I'll accept that. If you leave because you've fallen in love with someone else, I'll step aside. But if you're leaving because you think I don't want you, because you think you're imposing or taking advantage or whatever nonsense you've convinced yourself of, it's not nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. He took my face in his hands, gentle but firm. I'm in love with you. Completely, irrevocably, inconveniently in love with you. I have been for months, and if you walk out that door, it won't be because I let you go. It'll be because you chose to leave someone who loves you. The words hit me like a physical blow. You love me? I love you, he repeated. I love how you take apart financial statements like you're solving mysteries. I love how you're ruthless in business but still send money to Tyler's parents every month. I love how you leave your coffee cups everywhere and somehow never remember to close cabinet doors and still manage to be the most competent person I've ever worked with. He smiled slightly. I love that you're too stubborn to ask for help and too proud to admit when you're wrong and too brilliant to let anyone diminish you. Tears were streaming down my face. This is insane. We barely know each other. We got married for revenge. We got married for a lot of reasons, and revenge was only one of them. Daniel wiped my tears with his thumbs. But we stayed married because we chose to, because what we built together is more valuable than the reasons we started, because partnership became friendship and friendship became love, and somewhere along the way, this contract became the most real thing in my life. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. How to trust this. Tyler destroyed my ability to believe. Tyler destroyed your ability to believe in fantasy, in pretty lies and empty promises. Daniel's voice softened. I'm not offering you fantasy. I'm offering you reality. Messy and complicated and sometimes difficult, but real. And yours, if you want it. I pulled back slightly, looking at him. Really looking at him. 6 months ago, he'd been a stranger offering me a weapon to fight with. Now, he was the person I turned to when I needed strength, the voice I wanted to hear at the end of difficult days, the presence that made the enormous penthouse feel like home. I need to do something first, I said. I went to my office, the one in the penthouse, not at Thornton Maritime, and retrieved a file from the locked drawer. The employment contract we'd signed that first day. The marriage certificate. The prenuptial agreement. I brought them back to the bedroom where Daniel waited, watching me with barely contained tension. These are our contracts, I said, holding them up. Employment agreement, prenup, the terms we negotiated when this was just a business arrangement. Rebecca, let me finish. I took a deep breath. These contracts made sense when we were strangers, when we didn't trust each other and needed legal protection. But they don't make sense anymore. Slowly, deliberately, I tore each document in half, then in quarters. Then I kept tearing until they were confetti in my hands. I don't want a contract marriage anymore, I said. I don't want prenups and exit clauses and negotiations. I want something that can't be reduced to legal terms. Daniel stared at the torn papers, then at me, his expression stunned. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to renegotiate. New terms, new conditions, new everything. I stepped closer to him. I'm saying I love you too. I've been in love with you for months, but I was too scared to admit it because admitting it meant being vulnerable again, meant risking the kind of pain Tyler caused. And now? Now I understand that the pain was worth it, because it led me here. To you. To this. I took his hands. So here are my new terms. Partnership based on love, not convenience. Commitment that's not contingent on business outcomes. A marriage that's real, messy, imperfect, and completely ours. Those are good terms, Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. What else? No prenup this time. Full trust, full commitment. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. Except your coffee mugs, which are apparently communal property distributed throughout the entire penthouse. I laughed through tears. Except my coffee mugs. And you have to promise to stop working past midnight at least 3 nights a week. Only if you promise the same thing. Deal. I looked up at him. One more condition. Name it. We do this properly, not a city hall ceremony with strangers as witnesses. A real wedding, with people we care about, vows that actually mean something. We've earned that. Daniel pulled me close, and when he kissed me, it tasted like tears and laughter and promise. So we're really doing this? He murmured against my lips. Real marriage, no contracts, no escape clauses. We're really doing this. Good, because I already bought you a ring. I pulled back, surprised. You what? He went to his dresser, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not huge or flashy, but perfect. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and unique. I bought it 2 months ago, he admitted. I was waiting for the right moment to ask you properly, but you're beating me to the proposal, which is very typical of you. I'm not proposing, I protested. I'm renegotiating the contract. You're absolutely proposing. You tore up our prenup and demanded we get married for real. That's a proposal. He took the ring from the box. But since you did it without a ring, I get to do this properly. He dropped to one knee right there in our bedroom, still in his work suit, holding up the ring with a smile that was equal parts tender and amused. Rebecca Hayes Thornton, will you marry me? Again? For real this time, with no contracts or conditions except that we promise to drive each other crazy for the rest of our lives? I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the bed. This is the least romantic proposal ever. And yet you're crying. Shut up. I held out my hand. Yes, I'll marry you, again. Properly this time. He slid the ring onto my finger. Perfect fit, of course, because Daniel paid attention to details. Then he stood and pulled me into his arms. I love you, he said simply. I love you too. And saying it felt like freedom. The wedding happened in September, 15 months after our first hasty ceremony at City Hall. This time, we did it right. Small ceremony at a vineyard in upstate New York, surrounded by 50 people we actually cared about. Emma Wilson was there, thriving in her new position as senior auditor at Thornton Maritime. Michael Blackwell sent a letter from witness protection. He couldn't attend, but he wished us well. Even Dorothy and Robert Morrison came, tearful and grateful. My parents flew in from California, meeting Daniel for the first time and immediately adoring him. His parents came from Boston, his mother fussing over every detail and his father giving me a gruff hug and whispering, "Thank you for making him human again." No press, no spectacle. Just us and the people who mattered and vows that we wrote ourselves. I promise to be your partner, I said, holding his hands under an arbor wrapped in autumn leaves. Not your employee or your dependent, but your equal. I promise to challenge you when you're wrong and support you when you're right. I promise to leave coffee mugs all over the house and never apologize for it. That got a laugh from the crowd. I promise to love you, I continued, my voice breaking slightly. Not because a contract says I should, but because I choose to. Every day, for the rest of our lives. Daniel's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. I promise to earn your trust every day. To be worthy of the gift you've given me by choosing to stay. To build a life with you that's better than anything either of us could build alone. Justice Helen Morrison, no relation to Tyler, a happy coincidence that made us both laugh, officiated. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again, she smiled. You may kiss your bride. And he did, while 50 people cheered and I cried happy tears. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I marveled at how completely my life had changed in 15 months. 3 years after the day I'd sat in that Soho cafe watching my world fall apart, I walked into the same Garden Terrace cafe for lunch. This time, I wasn't hiding. Daniel and I had a standing monthly lunch date, a reminder to slow down, to connect outside the office, to be just Rebecca and Daniel instead of CFO and chairman. We sat at table 6 by the koi pond, the same table where Tyler and Tori had sat that day, celebrating their affair while I watched from the shadows. Do you ever think about that day? Daniel asked, following my gaze. Sometimes, but not with anger anymore. With gratitude, actually. Gratitude? If Tyler hadn't betrayed me, I never would have met you. Never would have discovered I could be this person, strong and successful and genuinely happy. I took his hand across the table. So, yes, gratitude. A woman at a nearby table caught my eye, mid-30s, well-dressed, staring at her phone with barely contained distress. I recognized that look, the shock of betrayal, the desperate need to understand what just happened. I watched as she stood abruptly and left the cafe, her phone clutched in white-knuckled hands. I'll be right back, I told Daniel. I found her in the lobby, leaning against a marble pillar, clearly trying not to cry. Excuse me, I said gently. I'm sorry to intrude, but I saw you inside and… Are you okay? She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm fine. Just found out my husband has been cheating for 6 months, with my best friend. But I'm fine. Her voice broke on the last word. I reached into my purse and pulled out my business card. I'm Rebecca Thornton, CFO at Thornton Maritime Group. If you need help, legal advice, financial planning, just someone who understands what you're going through, call me. She took the card, confused. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Because 3 years ago, I was you, and someone helped me when I had nothing. I'm paying it forward. She stared at the card, then at me. Did it get better? I thought about everything. The pain, the betrayal, the long nights of rage and doubt. And then I thought about Daniel waiting inside, about the career I'd built, about the woman I'd become. It gets different, I said honestly. Not easier right away. It's going to hurt for a while. But eventually, you'll realize the betrayal wasn't about you being insufficient. It was about them being small, and you'll build something better from the ashes. Did you? I smiled, thinking about the man waiting for me at table 6. I built something extraordinary, and I hope you do too. I walked back into the cafe, back to Daniel, back to the life I'd built from revenge and resilience and hard-won wisdom. He stood when I approached, pulled out my chair with a smile. Everything okay? Everything's perfect, I said, and meant it. Outside, the autumn sun painted the city in shades of gold. A new season, a new beginning, another woman starting her own journey from betrayal to strength. And me, finally, beautifully, completely whole. That night, in our penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, I found Daniel on the balcony looking out at the glittering lights of Manhattan. Penny for your thoughts? I said, wrapping my arms around him from behind. Just thinking about how different life looks from here, literally and figuratively. He turned to face me. 3 years ago, I was angry and alone and convinced I'd never trust anyone again. Now you're stuck with a wife who can't remember to close cabinet doors and spends way too much time buried in spreadsheets. Now I'm married to my best friend, my partner, and the most brilliant woman I've ever met. He kissed my forehead. I got the better deal. We both got the better deal. That's how partnership works. Speaking of partnership, he hesitated and I saw something nervous in his expression. I've been thinking. The company is stable, your position is secure, we're financially comfortable. Daniel Thornton, are you about to suggest we have a baby? His face broke into a smile. How did you know? Because I was about to suggest the same thing. I took his hand, placed it on my stomach. And because I'm 8 weeks pregnant. For a moment, he just stared at me, processing. Then he let out a laugh that was pure joy and pulled me into his arms, spinning me around while I laughed and protested and held on tight. "When were you going to tell me?" "I was waiting for the right moment. But apparently, you beat me to it." "We're having a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We're going to be parents." Terrible parents, probably. We both work too much and neither of us knows anything about children. We'll learn, together, like we learned everything else. I thought about that, about learning to trust again, to love again, to believe in second chances, about building something real from the ruins of betrayal. "You know what the best part is?" I said. "What?" "This child will grow up seeing what real partnership looks like. Not performance or obligation or transaction. Just two people who chose each other and keep choosing each other every single day." "That's a pretty good legacy," Daniel agreed. We stood on the balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, looking out at the city that had witnessed our transformation from wounded strangers to true partners. Somewhere below, life went on. Deals were made and broken. Hearts were betrayed and healed. People fell apart and found ways to put themselves back together. And in our penthouse high above it all, Rebecca and Daniel Thornton, two people who'd married for revenge and stayed for love, began planning their next adventure, not because a contract required it, but because they chose it every single day.